I'm going to be reading this out in two parts. Look Out, Killjoy Was Here by Thomas Cookson from the 7th of the 9th, 07. Some fans say that had John Nathan Turner's producership ended after season 20 or 21 and could someone have replaced him, then this era would have been well remembered and the show would have been much improved by the changeover. Personally, I think the only way I would have seen it that way is if the show had been cancelled halfway through the making of season 19. In other words, if they only got far enough to finish the first 4 stories of that season, and maybe instead of being transmitted they would have gone straight to video. Oddly enough, that would be the kind of parallel universe where the last years of the show would still have been regarded as the point where it all got silly, only for the last batch of stories such as Warriors Gate, Legopolis and Kind to be regarded as the kind of unprecedented creativity and intelligence for the show that demonstrates how unfairly the show got cut down too early. It would probably be only Peter Davison doing the Big Finish audios now, and the popular audience might share the fan perception on the avant-garde last stories, and the when it all got silly bit would probably be reappraised as very endearing frivolity, something that will never happen to Time and the Rani. I'm afraid I subscribe to the Tat Wood view of the John Nathan Turner era being a major misstep from far earlier than the Twin Dilemma. Incompetence is, however, the benchmark of John Nathan Turner era. Many of the worst stories of that era seem pretty farcical, but worse still, they seem to take themselves so seriously and earnestly. Likewise, the shock effects of much of the Colin Baker era feel oddly out of place and mismatched. They're not consistent with anything else except the show's neurosis, schizophrenia, and desperation. I must say, the Saywood era in season 24 are my main bugbear when it comes to Doctor Who. I'd say the new series bugs me too, but in a different way that prevents me from necessarily seeing it as a stain on the program proper. The new series is a separate series to me. For instance, whilst a lot of fans seemed to feel cheated when it was announced that Catherine Tate was going to be in the new show, I barely batted an eyelid, thinking the show had lost too much dignity already for me to even care anymore. When it comes to the worst of the John Nathan Turner era, I do feel it tarnished the show terribly. Warriors of the Deep completely bastardized the Pertwee classics that it was homaging. Between Dilemma and Mind Warp were the most hideous, abominable betrayal of everything the show's protagonist stood for, and Time and the Rani went beyond a neurotic and embarrassing viewing experience into an out-and-out hostile one, and for a once popular something for everybody show like Doctor Who, that is very sad indeed. It was enough to make me wish I couldn't care. When I first heard Dalek Empire, I thought that my wish had come true and that I had found a means to disown Doctor Who in favour of its better spin-off, that I could put my enthusiasm for the show down to the promise of a better side story that for too long had only existed as vague mythology in an absent paradigm, and that Dalek Empire had finally given me the satisfaction I'd always wanted and been denied from the show. I thought Dalek Empire would raise my standards bar to a ruthless level, causing me to disown most of the show for being comparatively below par, safe, slow, safe, cozy, or disposable. But it didn't. There was no way I could endure the hardcore bleakness of Dalek Empire without needing to turn to the safe, light-hearted frivolity of the Sunmakers or the Haunts of Niemann for relief now and again. It's quite simple, really. Batman fans may have been awed and enamoured by The Dark Knight Returns, but by and large they'll acknowledge it as just a change of beats that works on different terms to its predecessors, and they'll always really be fond of the Camp 60 series too. So I was back to my rabid, angry, helpless fanboy position, wishing to God that someone had killed off Doctor Who back in 1982 to preserve its dignity, finding it too hard to grasp that nettle that an institution like Doctor Who can't just end on a high. It needs to be going downhill for a prolonged period before someone will put it out of its misery. Some things have to end badly, otherwise they just won't end. So just as I get angry and sad about the travesties of the J&T era, I view the last 2 McCoy seasons with a warm sense of refreshment and joy at seeing the show pull itself together at last. But before it could improve, the show would have to hit absolute rock bottom, not be erratic, not have the odd diamond in the rough, a la Snake Dance, Caves, or Revelation, not even have one good story in the season. It had to be a terrible year all round. Time and the Rani is described as a pantomime of a story, but like many of the poor stories of the John Nathan Turner years, it doesn't have the sense of fun needed to function as one. As I've often said time and time again, this production team can't even do fast properly. It was embarrassing, childish, it was the show at its most lobotomized. I managed to view Time and the Rani thanks to the wonders of YouTube. I'd always wanted to see it out of morbid curiosity, and I'd expected it to be a so bad it's funny kind of story, and the clips I'd seen of the spinning bubble trap seemed very thrilling, but instead as I watched it I was left just waiting impatiently for the damn thing to end as early as part 1. The cliffhanger where Mel is trapped in a bubble and is sent hurtling to her death should have been the perfect hook for me to find out what happens next. I mean, how the hell was she going to get out of that one? And yet I found it quite difficult to even bother clicking on part 2. It just wasn't engaging me.